On Embracing All of Me, we often talk about identity and becoming, but today's conversation holds something especially rare. Home for the Holidays was a conversation that brought together bi plus and queer fathers for an honest, non performative conversation about family, identity, and what it means to raise children while embracing your full self. This conversation offers a quiet counter narrative, one rooted in presence and tenderness and ordinary joy. This conversation is also for the hope to be fathers and soon to be dads who may be trying to reconcile their orientation or identity with the idea of parenthood. This serves as a gentle reminder that there's nothing to reconcile. Consider this a lighthouse helping you find the way. Let's listen in.
Thought of being a dad was different from my thought of being a partner and being married and all of that. Although I assumed I would be partnered in that process, but that was partner of someone and being a father were two separate things in my mind.
I would say
And
for me, I had the same assumption as Keaton without really ever considering it, that this would probably happen someday. I did first become a dad at 26, and I didn't come out until 22, 23. So I think I was in a space where both things were burgeoning at the same time.
mm,
And even as I've re-entered the fray with a 2-year-old, almost 2-year-old, my feeling, like my thinking when you were describing your thoughts about the incongruency that you see, as you said, those things, the dad and the partner and the bi, the word that came to me before you said incongruent was they're all possible, because that's kind of how I look at getting into the fatherhood gig again. It's like, now I'm really gonna go hard on all these things because I know how.
you have a 2-year-old, right?
19 months.
19 months.
I am born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Spent most of my adult life in Oakland, California, and recently moved to Durham, North Carolina, where my primary nesting partner is from. I have a 21-year-old
Yep.
in college. I have a 7-year-old, and I have a 2-year-old here with me who was born in my home in Baltimore.
I have one kid. She lives in Durham. She's 36. She lives in
Hey,
Durham and owns her own house and everything. So she's all grown up. I was a single father for about 15 years of her childhood, from when she was 1.5 until she was 17. I'm originally from Texas and Oklahoma. I'm in Oklahoma right now visiting. I live in West Hollywood, California now.
Yeah, I'm from a suburb of Denver. I have two kids with my wife. A 5-year-old, almost 6. He turned 6 this month, and a 3-year-old who will be 4 in February. And we are back in Colorado. I made it out. I made it all the way to the ocean, and I've slowly worked my way back to Colorado. So we're back here.
Are you from Durham too? No.
I have no connection to Durham,
Okay, I was
unfortunately.
like, there's a lot of Durham energy so far. Okay. Oh, that's cool. Thank you guys for sharing. So when fatherhood actually showed up, right? So when it actually came into your life, whether it was, a plan or a plot twist, what part of you came forward that surprised you when you look back on maybe your first child or maybe after a period having a child again? Was there any part of you that came forward that surprised you, especially as someone who's bi, queer, fluid, or just a layered human?
I'm not sure if it's attributable to my bisexuality, fluidity, or not. For me, it was my mother's parenting. I was raised by my mother. And so my version of fatherhood to me looked a lot like what that was, with some tweaks for differences in my values and how I like to do it versus how it was done to me. I would say that was most of it. And there was a lot that I did agree with about the way that I was raised, it turned out.
What were some of those kind of like, how do I want to approach this type of thing?
I think it's more like maybe emotional and energetic. I feel like some of the values are really strong, but some of them are very different for me. My mom was a Christian, born in the 50s. And I was like, I don't know if you all remember like the Rad Dad zine back in the day, but I was really into that kind of idea when I was a young dad. Like, oh, that's me. I'm a rad dad, straight from the activist circuit to like fatherhood. But there was something emotional and energetic about the way that my mother made us feel secure, was watchful, that I think came into my idea of being a parent really strongly.
I think for me, it wasn't necessarily like a part of me that came forward, but just being more introspective and intentional. We had our first kid right before COVID lockdowns happened, right? It was December and then everything happened in March. And so you have a major role change, plus the world is changing, navigating what it looked like to be a partner again, like like your partnership has changed, your relationship with your parents changes because you're not just their kid, but you're now like the parent of their grandchild, which is different. You feel different, and especially during lockdown and like that first year of having a baby, it can be very isolating. And so you're like, are we losing our social lives because the world or because this is what it is now that we have a baby? And then also being like very introspective about like, what do I want? And I really like what Frank's bringing about like, what do I want to keep about how I was parented, about like value systems that I had going into this. Like in 2020 was the beginning of a lot of radicalization of how I was thinking about the world. I think that affects parenting as well. Okay, what am I going to hold on to and why? What am I going to let go of and why? And how does that make me feel? And then also running into like practicalities of things of, oh, okay, I thought I was going to not do this. And then here we are in the real world with a child. I think I just became a lot more intentional because I had to.
It was a fulfillment of an identity I felt I already had. I come from a very child-centric family. I'm the oldest child of oldest children, so my daughter was the first grandchild on both sides. It felt completely like what I was wanting to do. Politically, I was a feminist and all about like fathers are as much responsible for child rearing as mothers. And in fact, in my case, it ended up I was majority. And so for me, it was just like I'm stepping into the identity that I've been waiting to step into.
I'm going to share this link inside the description for everyone to check out. This was that research study that Keaton shared, and there's a lot of gems in there, and it seemed really thorough and eye opening. And so, part of that article in there, it says only 7 out of 422 parenting studies even mention by parents. 7 out of 422, and nearly none focused on bi dads. And I was thinking too, like sometimes with the studies, there's kind of like some maybe an erasure. How do you navigate being your full self in spaces that either want you to shrink, want you to straighten up, right? It's like, okay, I'm a dad, I'm in this presenting relationship. I'm just going to put this box. How do you guys navigate being your full self in these different kind of spaces? So Keaton, on your Instagram, you wear your bi merge, like Frank, you're in your biconic type of merge and that type of thing. How do you navigate that feeling of straighten up?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We moved to back to Colorado from Midtown Atlanta, which is like the queer center of Atlanta, and I would argue like maybe the South. And so we could walk out of our condo and just assume like everyone there was queer of some sort. You saw pride flags and bi pride flags and all sorts, which was really cool. And there, though, like to your point from earlier, Ross, like none of the spaces were like bi exclusive spaces. They're mostly like assumed to be gay spaces. And so even there, I was like, well, also here's my wife, but I belong. I promise I belong. I'm part of the tribe. I'm here. And then when we were moving to Fort Collins, knowing that we are gonna like lose that community and experience like that straighten up sort of vibe of like we're moving to suburbia with a bunch of other parents. And so I got a tattoo of the bi pride colors. And we have like not only a pride flag, but like bi pride flags in front of our house. And I think it's more of like just committing to myself of like, I'm not going to do this. Like it'd be easy to just let kind of people assume or to like fall back into the patterns of pretending I'm straight or care about football, but actively being like, I'm not going to do that. And so I'm going to be a little bit more in your face about it. So like, I don't shy away from it. Not that like I expect to like not be welcomed, but because I just don't want to lose touch with that part of myself accidentally and over time.
Do you feel like that too in parenting circles? Because you have little kids, right? Is there that vibe of kind of like in parenting circles just to kind of straighten up, or like in the daycare circles?
I'll wear like bi pride merch, and all of the teachers at the daycare were like, oh, we like your shirt. Cause I think a lot of them are bi too. They're young women, and I've seen like some bi pride tattoos, but like around the other parents, I don't like hide it, but no one ever asks about, sexual orientation. It doesn't really like come up, I think, very often because you can kind of assume unfairly, obviously. I think we're all evidence that this is an unfair assumption, but like
Right.
everyone there is a parent. We've seen each other's partners. They're all like heterosexual appearing couples. And so, yeah, there's just not a whole lot of space to chat about it.
Can I jump in on that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, echoing Keaton's experience as well about, the assumption that you're probably straight because you're a parent and you're in a hetero appearing relationship is definitely a thing that I've experienced. But one of my son's friends' fathers is queer of some flavor. I don't know specifically which, but I've got some bi pride pins on the bag that I carry with me all the time. So like he saw me, he knew me, he identified with that. And we connected and bonded a little bit about the fact that we're both part of Alphabet Mafia. And that's really different and really special in the spectrum of parent friends. And I'm really, really happy to have had that experience in my life.
Wow. So I'm a dad, hope to be, but looking from the outside in the whole parent friend dynamic, there has to be some stuff there too about how identity shows up, but also opportunity to connect with other people like queer parents.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's easier when the kids are really little. My son's heading toward 14 right now. So I think,
Okay.
he's off in his own social circle at this point. So those opportunities to make parent friends are fewer and further between. But yes.
Yeah, I agree. I've experienced a lot of the same. I think one of the key things that you both mentioned that really resonates for me is putting yourself out there. And even reading briefly through that study, I forget the phrase they used, but it was like selective socializing or something of that nature, which is like, I'm going to put myself in queer spaces because that's where I want to be. And those are the people I want to feed back to me and affirm my self-image, etc. I think that as out by men, we are already attuned to doing that to maintain our wellness and just have fun. And I think that as a dad, you just lean more into that because to the point that was made earlier about becoming a father, you kind of just get serious about things. And that includes yourself. Not only am I not going to shrink, but I'm not really even entertaining those types of environments or those types of attitudes. I don't have time for it. And if that means I don't have very many dad friends, then that's fine. I'll find them slowly but surely. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
I jump on that because I think part of it too is negative selection out. And so like being visible, wearing bi pride stuff or queer pride stuff, I know that like there's gonna be people who don't agree with it, don't like it, and I want them to not come talk to me. I don't want to waste my time trying to get to know these kids' parents if they aren't cool, if they aren't chill. And like the ambiguity around other people of like, are you cool? I'm trying to like find the signs, especially with dads in like the dad space. It's flip a coin of whether they're chill. And I think signaling not only to like find your people, but also to push away the people that aren't, because you just don't have time. There's no time to waste or invest in potential friendships where like 6 months in you find out that they're homophobic and you're like, I can't.
Right.
Why are we friends?
Why are we here?
This?
What are we doing?
Yeah.
I'm a time traveler, okay, because I'm from another generation, And I came of age during the early onset of AIDS. And I also was raising a child in the Midwest. I didn't come out until I was 60 years old. I always know I was bi, but I never lived it. I was not DL. I was nothing, I just never thought I would have to tell anybody. I did. I mean, what I was visibly is I was an ally, and it was important for me not to be homophobic and not to raise my child in that environment at all. And so in a way, that's how I kind of also did that social sorting, is that I was very clear as to my allyship at the time to both draw in queer. I had some of my daughter's parents were queer, and that I was a safe space for them, but I still was not out. And so I didn't have, I envy the generation that you all are, that it's a little, I kind of waited for the world to be ready before, and to be safer before I came out. But I always did non-gender normative, like I was a homeroom parent. I was on the field trips. I was doing, a lot of my friends were moms and their cool husbands, or moms and not their husband. That was kind of my social crowd that I developed as my daughter went through school.
There was a level of disclosure that you didn't engage in, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, I support, I won't tolerate homophobic people, and I'm protected in kind of what I.
And and so what, I did not live my full self because I did not experience that part of my life. I just knew that about myself.
Yeah, I would say it's really interesting for me because so my son is 9, my daughter is 11, both still in elementary. I am bisexual and I have a partner who is gay. Even yesterday, we just went on my son's field trip and we went to the zoo and had a blast, and we were both present there. I don't even think about whether people are perceiving my bisexuality or my queerness. I really don't give a fuck. I don't care about how people perceive me because I'm living my life and I'm living my best life and I'm enjoying it. And if you're that pressed about it and that annoyed that I'm living my life, like that says a lot about you, not about me. I kind of walk through life kind of playing blonde a little bit with certain people because I just don't have time or energy to address people. But with that being said, I mean, also, I'm a 6'3" Black man. I don't know that anybody's going to approach me and say, hey, I have a problem with your sexuality. I don't think that's ever been a conversation for me. I have friends at the school and the moms love me and hug me, and everybody's been welcoming. And those who haven't, I don't know that I've ever even paid attention to if they haven't, because I don't care. My children are doing well in school. The teachers have been great to me. That's kind of my perspective. We were at the zoo. I was having fun with the young kids, 6, 7. We were out there having fun and doing all the stuff. So, like, I mean, it's just, I don't know. That's just where my perspective is.
I think no matter who we're with and what other people think, it sounds like, Gattison, you're in a really empowered state. It's just like, oh, we just don't have time for the bullshit. And I don't blame you for that. Let's talk about these children, right? I know these are like, these are your babies and your people. And so, is there a moment where you thought, yikes, okay, I have to make sure that you survive? Have you all had one of those moments where you looked at your child and just been like, oh my God? Or maybe you look at them
Both.
now and you're like, wow, you are literally me.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
What are some of those moments that you share with your daughter that kind of ignite that feeling?
Well, so my daughter and I are very close. And like I said, it was she and me for almost 16 years of her childhood, and we're still very close now. But I remember her coming home from the hospital and not being able to sleep. And she was not a preemie, but she was very small, 5 pounds, 4 ounces, so right above the preemie weight. And I remember just turning on the faucet to have a faucet going for her to listen to while I'm trying to rock her, and just looking at her and just feeling completely connected to her and completely in awe of this being that was now in the world. And then there are just, I mean, everybody will talk about, like, there's just hundreds and thousands of different just little moments of where my revenge on her mother is that she has my sense of humor, so my ex-wife has to deal with that. But but we share that, and we share a lot. We don't have the same personality. We're not the same personality type, but we share a lot, and and it's fun to see that connection between us, and we look a lot alike.
I fully agree. You have like hundreds and thousands of both of those moments of like, oh my God, I'm responsible for someone else's life. And like the first night for me was, the most poignant, but it hasn't stopped. The very first one of, are you breathing? Do I have to like keep watching you? And not being able to sleep more than like 2 minutes, even though he was sleeping fine, but like getting up to check, like, has he fallen out of the crib? Which is not going to happen. No one gives you a handbook on this. And I don't know, just like being hit with the realization that my kids might look to me the way that like I look to my dad. And like my dad is capital D dad, right? That is my like prototype for what a dad looks like. And like, oh my God, I'm their prototype. And so like tonight, my oldest is pretending to be like our Google Home. And so I'd be like, hey, Google, and ask him a question. Hilarious. And so I was like, hey, Google, am I cool? And he's like, you are the coolest man in the neighborhood. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I was like, I think he thinks that actually. That's kind of cool. Like, I don't think that, but that's awesome that he thinks that because I'm his dad. And it's just sometimes those roles feel like I'm wearing it really smoothly and like it's part of who I am. And then every once in a while, I'm like, I still think of myself as like this bumbling 19-year-old hooligan, but I'm like 34 and a dad. And oh yeah, that fits too. I can be both of those things.
That day you come home from the hospital is like, wait, what? Because as the male partner in the relationship, like, she's been pregnant for 9 months. And yeah, I was there and I was involved, but not like, holy crap, there's a baby. And then you go from zero to baby as a man. Like, whoa, what just happened here?
It's inevitable. No matter how many books you read, no matter how many classes you go to, it just hits you all at once when the baby finally has entered the world, breathing its own. But I know for me, like today, for instance, I'll give you two from just today. My oldest son is in his senior year in college, and he called me up while I was driving, running some errands with his little baby brother. And he called me up and he was talking about final exams. He was talking about a girl that he became involved with. He said that she was crazy, maybe. And he didn't really care, but he was kind of sad that she decided to not continue. I was talking with him and I was joking with him when I came home and my partner's here and things like that. I said, like, this kid, he's calling me up. He's dropping all this stuff on me, and we're just talking about it, like, just giving thanks. Like I said, I didn't know my dad until I was 16, 17, right? My son is still calling me, like, when he's stressed, when he needs someone to bounce stuff off of, this and that, right? So that feels really good. I'm still your dad, even though you've already exceeded me in some areas of life. By the same token, there was something going on we were discussing with the littlest one, like strategies for dealing with his tantrums. He's starting to talk, and you can't give kids timeouts when they're under 2, 3 years old. They're not really processing that. You're just being angry, like, so what do we do? And I was saying to my partner, like, I think it's a shift in tone that we have to go for. Like, we have to definitely shift the tone for those moments and say, no, you can't punch me in the face. You got to give it a space to shift the tone. So he hones in, right? But wait,
You get it.
you're saying something. And she said, that's what they said in that book. And I said, hell yeah, I'm good at this, right? So this is my life as a dad right now.
And thanks for sharing that. And what you said sticks out about shift in tone and kind of like the appropriate language and appropriate context, I guess. And so I wonder, maybe those with smaller kids and maybe even older kids, how you all have navigated the identity conversation in your home. That's kind of a big piece of this. And maybe even to add on to that question, what do you hope that they understand about who you are? Or are these conversations that you have chosen to avoid? or not engage in yet?
So we've got little kids. I think your direction was towards little ones. We haven't had a conversation about my identity specifically yet because we haven't really talked about like love or marriage or anything like that. But we have like done like gender conversations of like my kids know what non-binary is, which I think is so cool. And they like will catch me sometimes. I'm like, they'll say a gender. I'm like, or she, or like my oldest will be like, or they, dad. I'm like, yeah, son. Nice. And I think like the same perspective of like when they do start to ask about like what does it mean to be married or love or whatever, or like what is that flag in front of our house, what does that mean? I think just being open and your way of phrasing of like what do you want them to understand about you rather than like who you are, but like what do you want them, their takeaway to be is I think really Robin Oakes, it always goes back to Robin Oakes. She's got like the definition, right, of just like I've got the capacity to be attracted to or romantically involved with anyone, but I choose your mom. Your mom's my person. And like, how cool is that? And giving them the space to like find what that means for them. And hopefully like, it shakes out without any of the same shame or anxiety that I think our generation, a lot of us had if we were navigating what our sexuality looked like.
And even language too, because it sounds like you're modeling and you're giving your kids the language. Because I don't know if anyone else, like when I was little, I didn't have the language until I was 16 to be like, oh, being bi is like that's when it worked, right? So I think if they're younger too, maybe one of your kids will end up being a part of the alphabet mafia, as someone said earlier. You never know, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I noticed in that study was that bisexual fathers have a higher likelihood of challenging gender norms, not only our heterosexual, but also even our homosexual father friends. And I think there's something there. I think that we are more likely to want to break down binaries across many different spectrums and aspects. I know for me, again, with the very young and the older boys, my 19-month-old, people are saying, is that a boy or a girl? And a lot of times I'll say, it's a boy, but doesn't really matter at this age, does it? And then laugh. And because it doesn't matter. They have different ways that they get you dirty when you're changing them
Yeah.
slightly. But recently, again, my 20-year-old over Thanksgiving was telling some story to myself and my dad and his mothers about how I was dressing them up in girls' clothes, preschool. And he didn't like that. I had too much stuff going on with sexuality and gender. And I should have thought more about how he had to deal with these people in Oakland, where he's from. I said,
Mm.
first of all, I didn't do that. Your mom did. That was not me. But it was a valid point that we may want to express through and on our child these values that we wish to kind of impose outwards onto society.
We often hear stories about, the kids coming out to the parent and that type of thing. We rarely think about how that shows up in the opposite direction. It's kind of like age appropriate, time and place.
I do think that, just because I didn't answer your initial question, I think for me, it's always about the community and the company that I keep and all the friends. And I've been polyamorous for much of my life as well. It's not just me that a child is learning about the world from. It's the people that I choose to have around, chosen family, etc. And I think that does a lot of the work of having that identity conversation with your child. Like, okay, so dad's best friend is different in this way or that way. My dad is like this and mom is like that. And it is what it is. To figure it out if you can surround yourself well enough.
My daughter was a generation, I think, of Keaton at least, and she had gay friends even as middle schoolers. Like, it was not coming from totally heteronormative into that. And I didn't come out till I was 60. So she was 33 when I came out. She was very easy to come out to. She'd been raised right and it was great. But I think it does depend on what the environment you were in. And we were in different parts of the country. And it is very different. I'll tell you, it's very different in West Hollywood, California than it is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so you're more aware of it's not that you can't be open. It's just more energy to go through it. When you do choose to make a point of your sexuality or something, you're just having to pull up more energy to do it instead of just I like living in West Hollywood because there I'm going the opposite way. I'm trying to advocate non-bisexual erasure among the gay population, so which is its own battle, but I don't know. My daughter had gay friends from as soon as she really understood about sexuality, because that generation, there were at least some of those kids that were expressive of their sexuality in middle school, at least.
Something Frank said, I think really stands out to me too, of like, you carry these cultural scripts of what it means to be a dad, what it means to be a man. And then when you're a parent, it's hard to like not fall into those, even though like as especially someone who's like fought against them and, feminist, bisexual man on the left, I'm like, I don't buy into them, but you catch yourself just like, oh, we don't do that. Like you know, boys don't wear nail polish, and then it never makes it out, but you have that thought. And then to the counter side of it of like, do you have these counter scripts then to like combat that? And then how do you balance really not pushing any of this, right? Like this is like this whole internal cognitive thing that you're going through of, oh, I don't actually believe this, but I believe this, but like I also don't want to force any of this on my kid. Like I want them to just be who they are as they are. And like, how do I create space for just like openness and like, expression and play and creativity for whoever they are and wherever they are without any of the scripts, like certainly from us, right? Like they're going to get exposed to it from the rest of the world, but not putting on, like creating a space where we don't have these scripts about like what you have to do either as a man or as like a modern man or someone who's like, I don't know, I can't think of a better word, but like woke, right? Like just creating space for them to be who they are. And I think that's been really, really hard because there's no real guide on how to just create like that blank canvas without putting yourself on it. And that's a really hard part about parenting for two.
One thing that I like, because a lot of the things that I did were the things that mothers do, but I never would say I was maternal. I was parental. And I intentionally used that word early on, that I'm being parental in a lot of the stuff I'm doing, because I agree. That's where I live, in that let's create play, let's create learning, let's create curiosity. Those things are, if you're open to curiosity, then one of the curiosities may be sexuality or those kinds of things, but you're just creating a spirit of curiosity. And that's what I always tried to. First of all, I like it. First of all, it's fun. But I think that if you talk to my daughter's friends, I was the fun dad in that way, not in maybe a way that other fun dads are fun dads. But
I was just going to say that, in my situation, my ex-wife and I split up when my son was, I want to say, 6 months old, and my daughter was maybe 1.5, something like that. So we were really intentional to try to create space that what's normal is that we love you, and we are two different people that need to experience two different things. And we all love you, we love each other, but in that particular moment, and it's kind of a complicated story, but basically, I was not allowed to, because of religion, even explore that side of my sexuality. So a lot of me getting into a relationship with a woman was based on religious sensibilities. So when we finally kind of dissolved our marriage and we said, okay, what kind of environment do we want to create for our children? It was out of this idea of saying and trying to model that you are able to and are free to love who you want to love. And that's normal. So we've had many conversations with our kids about what it looks like to love, what it looks like to accept people into your world, and how precious that is to be able to love someone, explore sexuality. It's not like there is no agenda to push anything on you. If you're hetero, awesome, just be a good hetero. If you're a gay, be a good gay. If you're a good do whatever you want, just be a good person. And at that point, then, it's free for them to talk and do whatever they want to do.
Yeah. And there's a part of the question too that I wanted to ask about the LGBT visibility in schools, right? Because I think that agenda part that you mentioned, Keaton, and having it balancing, having to not feel like an agenda, and like Gattison, how you said too, it's kind of like focusing on love. What do you all feel about this whole teaching LGBTQ in schools, like as parents? Because part of it, we know that a lot of it is propaganda and fear mongering. I mean, do you all have any thoughts on appropriate ages to know certain terms, to be exposed to certain concepts? What do you feel about that and your child?
Well, if there are gay parents in the school, then I think it's appropriate for there to be books that depict families with same-sex parents. I really do think that it's like, when does the question come up for the child? If there are gay families in their life, or if is that in their life, which may be from an early age or maybe later, I think there ought to be more sex education. And I would leave it to experts on child psychology as to what is appropriate at what age. But I think a lot of the problems that we have in the world are because of sexual hangups, hetero or bi or homo or whatever sexuality you are. But I think if you have, like, it was not in my, I mean, my daughter's, it was not there in when my daughter was going to school at all, even though the principal was gay, but she wasn't closeted, but she wasn't open at school about it. I knew about that. Some people knew about that, but it's like, if there was a question, if Johnny has two dads or two moms, that there should be books about that, and there are.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it's human variation, right? We wouldn't blink twice about having books about taller people versus shorter people, or stories about people who have, like, I don't know, large noses, right? Like, and I think representation matters and it's important. We've got the Marlon Bundo book, the Gay Bunny book that we've read to our kids, and it's not anything other than just like, look, sometimes, yeah, boy bunnies love boy bunnies. And then you move on. And like, at least for a 3 and a 5 year old, that's kind of like where the conversation stops, is like, oh, yeah, there's variation. And like, that's where it should stop. It's not, it doesn't have to be bigger than that. I don't think it is bigger than that, other than like, it's just normal variation. As far as like sex ed, I mean, it's abysmal in the States generally. And I think it's important that, like, when there is sex ed, if you have access to quality sex ed, it should be inclusive, and it rarely is. But that's like a really big step. Generally, I think we're fighting just to have like decent sex ed that's not like abstinence based in the first place, let alone like having it be, queer inclusive. But yeah, I think as far as like representation, it matters. And the big hullabaloo about it is like a bit of a moral panic, especially around like trans representation. And it's used to harm people, particularly women and or femme presenting people.
Yeah, I think there is a difference between sex education and representation of variation. So I think for younger kids, it should be absolutely normal that you see the variation of love. It doesn't need to go any further than there's just variation in love. And that's a beautiful thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, sex education, I think, is very different. And I think that's in my personal opinion, that is where each family needs to make that decision as to when they would like to open that box. Because let's be really honest, once that box is open, then there's, at least for me, the way I see it is, now I'm going to have some more very pointed conversations and really walk my child through it, my children through it. So, yeah, that's where I land.
Just sounds like there's a nuance between the sex ed and then like love and relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very, very fortunate here in San Diego, Southern California, that the sex ed curriculum's quite progressive and that it talks about gender roles and it talks about orientation and it does that in a fairly healthy way. the culture writ large still does an amazing job of imparting the idea that queerness is not acceptable. So having some balance in that, coming not only from my wife and I, but also from the other major authority in my son's life, his school, is really a nice thing to see. He's had friends over and somebody will say, "Oh, that's so gay." And I'm like, "Oh, I want to intervene and I want to like wash that right now because it's not that's so gay in a happy way. That's so gay derogatory, right?" Like I was caught off guard when it happened and I wasn't like, I didn't have a script in my head. And I'm like, okay, I need to be ready for this because we hit that age where that kind of epithet is thrown around. And yeah, I mean, that's the culture at work still, which is not so great. And in fact, I've always was pretty tepid about my sexual orientation and like, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to do what I want to do. And if I happen to be in a queer presenting relationship, then the people around me are going to know that part of me. And then within the last, I don't know, year or two, I was like, okay, the world is off the rails and I need to not be so quiet about who I am. I need to be more open and seen and show other people that they're seen. And, I haven't had like a coming out talk with my son, but there's a pride flag in front of my house. I have a rainbow wrist watch band and like, you know, is he picking this up? Where's the moment where I have that conversation? I still haven't figured that out. And it feels really weird to think about coming out to your own kid.
I know, I know. And that, Brian, how you just said that, and thanks for sharing that. I think that from someone outside looking at bi fatherhood, right, which is all of you represented in some way, I'm just like, damn, how does that go? If I couldn't do it to my parent, like, and then I'm in a situation where, damn, now I got to do it to you and I brought you here. It's just like, wow, seems like you all are it, and one size doesn't fit all, right? It sounds like too. I think everyone's situation, dynamics, context, all of is so layered. And yeah,
But you're all laying the groundwork. You lay the groundwork that you're raising a child that understands that is receptive to it at whatever age they're receptive to it.
right.
And there's a difference between teaching our children. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy. I'm not going to keep this from you, but it may be that I don't express all details of what that means to me because that's private. But I'm going to be open with you about, the general part of it. But it's the relationship you have established, I think, before you have that conversation.
I think it's also, I really relate to what Brian was speaking about with being embedded in a community that just makes it easier. I think those are also important parenting choices, that we are able to make. But I do think that overall, it is about us as the parent. It's, to Gaddison's point, I'm going to have that conversation with my child because it's not just that one. There's all these intersectionalities that I have to deal with, that my child has to deal with in relation to the rest of the world. And we're going to discuss those things. That's where the real information is coming from. Even when it comes to learning and why we do it and how we do it. We're doing that at home because it's fun and that's what we do. And we already know that at school, they're not even really equipped to do all the things that we're doing. And that's the state of the world. But I do think in many respects, the ways that we treat ourselves, the ways that we take care of ourselves prepares us to deal with our child. They say it takes a village, right? This has nothing to do with sexuality, but I tend to think that when they say it takes a village, they're not really talking about a child. They're talking about the parents living in an interdependent framework, right? So it's not just childcare, it's everything. You can't raise a child with just two adults. That's not natural. You know, you need to be
Right.
within a village, a framework. And if you choose a framework for yourself that is affirming, then that's what you're going to give to your children.
And I would hope that I could plant the seed in my kid, like, hey, be daddy's little advocate. Daddy needs an advocate. So if you hear something at school, like if they're talking about the little bi kid or the little kid who, oh, why does he act so gay? Whatever. I need you to please advocate.
Depend on your child and what their personality is and whether they are
Exactly.
an extrovert or
Exactly.
introvert.
There's one more before we kind of close this is so we're in this holiday period with family too. And so I don't know if you all experience the time period of your family seeing you with this person and then okay, that person falls off. Now they're seeing you with this person and that person falls off. But when you're going to these holiday gatherings with your biological family, chosen family, how has it been navigating assumptions about you or your relationships or your kids or identities? And what I mean by that, just to be direct, right? Do you have, has it been like you go to a family dinner and there's jokes, side comments, or is your environment more respectful? Or maybe that doesn't come up because maybe your close family doesn't really know.
I think that for us, like the more poignant i- interaction there is like, again, creating and navigating a space that we like want our kids, like the worldview that we want our kids to have. And that doesn't always align with our extended family or the people that we interact with. And so, like, what our rules are, what our expectations of our kids are versus like what other people's are, and like trying to also walk the line of like, well, we're not trying to like step on their toes in the moment, but we want you to know this, or like, don't think that, but also like not in quite as strong of terms. So we want to like, again, push that frame, but just create space. And so I think that's the hardest part is like, what do you let go? What do you push back on? What do you correct in the moment? And we've had a lot of conversations, I think, with our kids, especially our older kid, of like around language, because we are not like letting them like run around dropping F bombs, but like, hey, don't say but around your grandma. And he's like, is it a bad word? I'm like, there are no bad words. We just don't want to use words that like make people feel bad. And there are some words that only do that. And then there are words like but where like sometimes it's just, it's going to make grandma feel bad and uncomfortable. And we don't want to use our words to make people feel uncomfortable. And so like we change where we use certain words and who we use those words with.
So like read the room, kind of.
Yeah, which is hard for a 5-year-old. They can't do that.
They
But
can't
like
read the room.
laying the groundwork, and like now he thinks it's funny and it's like an inside joke. But like I think it's been less about like sexuality. I mean, for us, because like I'm in a monogamous relationship that's been 10 years now of dating, being together, and so like it's not different partners coming, like as you mentioned, like dropping off. But like I think it's just navigating the space that we're trying to create, and like what happens when not everyone's on the same page when you get to those extended families.
Everyone in my family is afraid to introduce the family to anybody. So you have to be a pretty serious long-term person for the person to bring you, because we're a lot. But we don't really get together. I mean, I'm visiting my cousin and her family with my daughter this Christmas, and that'll all be cool. But the one I pity is the fiance of my cousin's son, who is new to the group, and she'll have to endure that.
Yeah, sometimes it's better just to keep the family out for now until we work this out, and then I can bring you in.
We've never had anybody that, because I know that there are people that's like, okay, what's the girl, who's the girlfriend or the boyfriend that shows up this year? And I did have a sister-in-law that was sort of like that we would always encourage the boyfriend to stand at the edge when we're taking the family picture. He could be in it, but we wanted to make sure he could be cut out if we needed to.
Dang, you're literally getting him in position.
I mean, we knew. I mean, he didn't know, but we knew.
Right, right. Hilarious.
For me, I don't really spend too much time with extended family. I think it's not necessarily a sexuality thing, but there's so many these days. There's a lot of political values types of things that are not necessarily congruent with sexuality and beliefs around sexuality and gender is just one of them. I would say the last time I really spent time with my mother's side of my family, my extended family, I purposefully brought not only my primary partner, but my next closest partner who happened to be male as well. And maybe that's some of that negative selection or whatever the term was. It's like, yeah, this is me. This is my team. This is my armor. This is the me that you're going to get today. So if you're going to say something weird, then we're going to laugh together at you. And if you don't want to talk, then it's fine. You know, with my family that I actually like spend Thanksgiving with, you know, my dad, my stepmom, my many brothers and sisters, not too much of an issue. They're either acting as allies or just giving me blank stares because they don't know what I'm talking about. And I just,
Right. They just stare.
yeah, I don't know what that is. Okay. Some weird stuff.
We were all, and we are all, someone's child. And so, what is one or two things when your kids look back on you years from now? This is how my dad did life. This is how my dad showed up. What's one or two things you hope that they understand about the way that you love them? When your kids age 10, 20 years from now and they look back on you, your life, how you showed up, the choices you made, what's one thing that you hope that they understand about how you did life, the way that you love them?
I want her to say that she could talk to me about anything and that I led life with curiosity that I shared with her.
Thanks for that.
I think that created an open space for them and showed them that there's a big, wide world for them to learn and explore and discover, and that they can always come back to their mom and I as a safe space because they are in a secure, unconditional love. Yeah, I think those are the big ones.
I was agreeing very much with the idea of unconditional love that, I am here for my kid no matter what. The other thing that I really hope that he's picking up from me is that, yeah, dad knows some stuff, but dad doesn't know everything. Like, I've been super intentional about traveling, making sure that he sees other parts of the world, other cultures, that there's other ways to do things, and that just because we do it this way here in our house doesn't mean it's the one and only right way.
I hope that they look back and can say authentically that dad really supported me being me, that he didn't have an agenda on who I was supposed to be, but that he really just wanted me to be me and he was happy with that. I hope they also look back and just feel supported in their dreams, meaning like just that they felt like dad was down for anything that they actually really wanted to do and really pushed them and partnered with them to accomplish those dreams.
Thanks for that. We can bathe in the wonderful words. It sounds like a lot of unconditional love, a lot of sowing seeds of possibility and discovery and meeting them where they are. That's what makes our demographic awesome, because we are positioned to do that. And I wonder, I guess, hetero guys are and dads are, but it's like those types of things seem like they come natural to us because that's kind of what we needed, right? Or what we would have hoped for. Thank you all so much for joining this living room conversation. I want to do something like this every year. I just feel like the holidays, queer people in general, it's hard. And I don't think that men's spaces and this topic gets enough time. So, maybe next year we'll have another home for the holidays. But thank you so much for joining. All right, gentlemen, we'll have a great night. Get some rest, get some food, get some water, and I will see you online. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you to the dads who agreed to be on this and agreed to have their voices recorded to share with the world. And I want to name something kind of simple. Bi and queer fathers are real. not theoretical, not symbolic, real people living real lives. And they are married, single, divorced, co-parenting, polyamorous, partnered in so many different ways, showing up for their kids and their families and society every day. What comes through in this conversation isn't just that queer dads exist, but they hold a unique capacity for love. We live at the intersection of identities, relationships, and ways of being that really just give us an expanded understanding of what care, empathy, and connection looks like. Probably because we've had to sit with and contemplate what that looks like for us. And think about this: if the lack of love is at the center of so many of the world's problems, imagine the kind of love that a bi plus father can bring into a child's life. Love that isn't confined into a script, a shape, or a person or a story. If you're listening and wondering whether your identity and future can coexist, let this be your reminder that they already do. Thank you so much for being here. Happy holidays as we enter a new year, but as we enter tomorrow, and just try to do the best that we can to keep surviving day by day. Take care.